Welcome back to The Rock, and finally we see some maps and visuals on the screens behind us here at the Results Operating Centre, and let's take a look at that map on the screen right now, just giving us an indication of the voting stations, how they're doing, who's reported that they're open. Now let's just remind you, there are 22,924 voting stations around the country, and from the visual behind us, let's just turn around and have a look. You can see that map over there giving us a clear indication of who is open, and it looks like the large majority of the voting stations are operational right now. The green signifies that they are open and they are working. The yellow is signifying that they're outstanding, obviously not having heard from those voting stations as yet. And the red, you'll see there are little specks of red on that map showing that those voting stations have not opened. We want to talk to that now. In studio with me, I've got another political analyst. It's great to see him again. Mcebisi Ndletyana, good to have you. Thanks so much for sitting with us here on the special broadcast. That map, is it telling? I mean, shouldn't it all be green?
It should be green, but you have more than 22,000 voting stations. I guess we would expect hiccups here and there. Ultimately, though, you shouldn't be seeing closures, for instance, that some of them have not even opened, because the IEC starts preparing for the next election soon after one election, right? Like now, on the 10th of May, they'll start preparing for the next election.
Yeah.
And these are basic things, the basic mistakes that they make. So hopefully there should be a reasonable explanation as to why some of them haven't opened. Maybe it's weather, maybe it gets too windy.
Kate did talk to that. Kate said, a lot of the times you'll find that maybe a tent had blown away overnight or something had happened to a structure that was set up, and that obviously delays the process of voting.
This is the 10th election, I think, for the IEC since it became permanent in 1997. So there's institutional memory. They have a manual. They can do this thing in their sleep, right? Because of that longevity, right, of time. So you don't expect these kinds of mistakes happening. And I hope they do keep a registry of folks that haven't performed well. So in the next election, they don't invite them back.
Yeah.
Because some of these things are just elementary, really, especially for an institution that has been running elections for so long. But, as you said, we have more than 22,000 voting stations. We don't quite know how many. Well, from the map there, they are quite minute, the number of those that haven't opened. Those that are still outstanding, I don't know why they can't report that they are open and not in this day and age. You have cell phones, even grannies use cell phones, even people in rural areas use cell phones. So location and age is not an excuse not to use a phone or have some form of communication.
Yeah, we should be getting some word in from them. I want to talk to some of the queues that we've been seeing at these voting stations.
Yeah.
It hasn't been, it's not overwhelming, is it? I mean, we've seen some voting stations, and maybe it's also just the ones that we're checking in with that are kind of quiet at the moment. Some of them, not even a single voter there, and others just a trickle of people slowly coming in. If we have to look at previous elections, well, what are you reading into this? Is this, what is it indicating to us?
This is a normal trend.
Okay.
While 94 was exceptional, it was quite full from the very beginning, right? But now we are on our fifth or so national election.
So we're old hands at this.
We're old hands at this. We're not panicking. There's no need to rush. But one does hope, if, for instance, around 1 or 2, you continue to see a trickle, then you have to start worrying, especially in places like Gauteng, because Gauteng is notorious for long queues and people complaining that the voting station might close before they vote. My sense is that they've made some innovations here in Gauteng to ensure that even around the voting station you have some substations around to ensure that you enable as many people as possible. And the queues, that's the problem. With this long ballot paper that we're having now with 48 parties, the ballot paper is long, so it takes you even longer, most likely, to go through that ballot paper, right? So that might add a minute or two in terms of that queue moving.
When you say going through the ballot paper, I mean, surely you know by the time you walk in there who you're voting for.
Well, you haven't seen the ballot paper, right? You're seeing it for the first time.
So you don't really know where the party is you're voting for.
You don't know where it is.
Okay.
You don't know where it is, so you have to look.
Yeah.
But the good thing about this ballot paper is that the logo and the name of the party are accentuated. and you are unlikely to have the confusion as well that we've had in the last elections with the AIC and the ANC placed closer to each other, even
Yes.
APC.
Yeah.
They are separated quite nicely, so you will be able to see the party that you want to vote for.
Let's move on to having a look at former presidents voting. In fact, remember that we are going to be continuing to show you the former presidents voting. The list I have in front of us, we've got Comrade Thabo Mbeki. He should be voting, I think, at around about 12 o'clock. He'll also be in Killarney. There's also going to be Jacob Zuma. He should be voting at about 10 o'clock in Kandla. And of course, we will see the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, voting. But I want to talk to past presidents.
Yeah.
Does it matter? I mean, we run after them to see them voting and get their comments. And I mean, we saw Kgalema Motlanthe trying to get into a voting station. The media just packs around him. You wanted to comment on that?
Well, it affirms the importance of voting.
Yeah.
That you have a former president, especially a popular president who still commands a lot of respect and admiration. To go out there, the media obviously will also create a little bit of excitement. Even those perhaps who are not keen on voting today, seeing former president out there voting, someone that they admire telling them to vote, reminding them about the importance of voting. It's even better that for the ANC actually, that these are former presidents of the ANC who are going out to vote. He seems to be quite confident that the ANC will do well. In KZN, Zuma is obviously a controversial choice.
Yeah.
KZN folks might be excited that Msholos is going to vote, but elsewhere, they're like, okay, maybe he won't have a similar effect. But the point is, and this has been the tricky thing for the ANC, but the ANC wanted all hands on deck to use a variety of individuals, especially deploy them where they are most popular. So even though Jacob Zuma might be unpopular outside of KZN, he plays well in KZN, so KZN folks seeing him vote there might get them excited. So it does matter, and of course Thabo Mbeki will follow later on. So it's a good thing, yeah.
It is a good thing, and it is an exciting moment. It really is. I mean, when you as a South African are sitting at home right now and you're watching people starting to queue, you see former presidents coming in, you're reminded about our history and how far we've come as a country. Almost everything that we've seen in the run-up to this, and there have been some very ugly stories that have been coming out just before these elections. But when this day arrives, I think people almost take their civil duty and say, right, this is it. I'm going to go out there. And this leads me to the talk of turnout. What are you predicting? I mean, we look at over 70% of South Africans generally go out and cast their votes. Do you think this will happen again in these elections?
The last time it was around the 72%, I think. A lot has been happening, or has happened since 2014 and now. People disengaged, people became disgruntled, and you saw that disgruntlement, I think, in the 2016 elections. But the turnout in that election was quite impressive, actually. Local government elections at 56% or so, even more. It could have been possibly the highest turnout, in a way, for local government elections. So for this election, there's a lot of excitement. There's a bit of change that is happening. There's a new optimism. The ANC has been drumming up the beat of renewal. So we are beginning to emerge out of the morass that we've been under. So there's excitement. So with excitement, with the possibility of something new happening, people are drawn into the electoral process. Some of them are drawn to stop others whom they see as a menace to the safety of the republic. So I think everyone here who's eligible to vote has a reason to vote. Optimism, to stop others from voting. You have a variety of choice as well. 48%, we need not necessarily celebrate that, because some of these parties are marginal parties formed by egotistic individuals. I mean, they vary from the ridicule to the most comical, right? But nonetheless, you do have a variety of choices. Workers' Party, populist parties, the ANC, a party that promises non-racialism. You have conservative fringe parties. For the entire spectrum, the ideological spectrum is catered for. So there is no reason really for a voter not to vote. And it is it's very important to emphasize that yes, of course, people have not received what they thought they would get from this government. But staying at home is not an effective answer.
It doesn't help.
It doesn't help,
doesn't.
right? So if you are angry, express your anger in an active way.
Yeah.
Because after all, you are a citizen. This is a democratic state. The responsibility ultimately lies with you. What you get is what you put in.
Yeah, yeah. You know, one of the things that we need to talk to as well is the youth, because that's the worrying statistic we look at. There are, if I'm not mistaken, 10 million people that are not registered that are eligible to vote in these elections, and the majority of them fall into the category of the youth. And I think the most unregistered people are the very young, 18 to 19 to 21. That's a very, very young voting section, a voting population that the EFF speak to as well.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk to that because you mentioned something quite earlier, which I found quite interesting, is that the EFF and voter turnout is a very big factor because the youth are what they look for, and it's the youth that get despondent.
There are many things there to consider. Yes, the youth naturally would not be keen to vote. Because they're not working yet. They don't think that what happens around them has any bearing on their lives. They're self-conceited. They're concerned with Twitter and everything else. But once you start looking at mid-20 to the early 30s, when people enter the labor market, they start paying tax. Actually, that segment from 28 to 29 right up to 38, 39 is the largest.
Biggest. That's the biggest.
Is the largest, right? Which is a shift, because previously the largest was from 40s upwards. So the critical segment of the voter population is there, and the reason they are there is because they are paying tax. They know that whoever is in power has an impact on them. As for the EFF, it's quite interesting actually, because the polls are projecting growth for them, and yet their target support has gone down. But I guess what one can surmise from that is that the fact that they're focusing on a largely unemployed constituency works well for them, because that's a large constituency that has a gripe, so you can always get something out of them.
Very interesting, it really is. So we'll continue to monitor how things are going here at the IEC, and of course the voter opening of the stations. We're still seeing that map over there, and it's good to see that those red areas, those red dots are getting fewer and fewer, and that map is turning green as the minutes tick by. Let's take a break here on the program, and we'll see you once again after this. Stay tuned.